What's going on, everybody? And welcome to the showdown of the two full-featured QRP rigs. And you had to know it was going to be this pairing. So we've looked at a whole lot of radios so far in this series. And it comes down to these two. Now, whichever one wins this, I was going to put it up against the KX1, but that's not really fair. So probably what I'll do is I'll shoot another video kind of comparing and contrasting whichever radio wins this versus that. Because they're sort of in two totally different leagues, right? I mean, if you're a CW only operator, the KX1 is fine. So like for me, I could live with that radio, but because I primarily operate CW. But for a lot of people, you couldn't live with just a KX1. So either of these radios, you probably could. So let's talk a little bit about these two particular radios and why I think they came down to be number one and number two, and then we'll kind of look at the differences between these two radios and we'll pick a winner. So last time we took a look at the Lab 599 Discovery TX500. Yeah, that name's a mouthful. We said the size was 3.5 by 8.1 by 0.8 inches. All right. Our weight was 19.4 ounces. Our power output was 10 watts. It's actually 11 inch. Actually, on some of the bands, it'll go as high as like 13 and a half. It's rugged, it's weather resistant. This is the best built radio I own. Full stop, end of story, bar none. It is. The build quality of this radio is second to none. It's got a monochrome pan adapter, which is a nice feature to have, and I like the monochrome. It makes it easy to read in the sun. It's got superb audio. The audio on that radio is better than any radio I own, period. It's got an excellent receiver. It's got excellent filtering. It's 160 meters to 6 meters. It'll do phone, it'll do CW, it'll do digital. You do need an external sound card device or whatever, like a digi-rig or something to do digital on this thing. I do have a digi-rig for it. I've made many digital contacts on this. In fact, when I first started doing digital, this was the radio I used to do digital. So we looked at this radio before and we looked at all of its different features. We'll talk briefly about it. I'm not going to go as in depth as I did in the last video, because if you want to see the features of this particular radio, watch that previous video and I walk through this radio in depth. Well, let's compare that to the Elecraft KX2. So the KX2, they are expensive. The Shack in a Box is currently going for about $1,600, which is insane, but that's neither here nor there. It's about a 16-week wait, and that's optimistic. Elecraft is notorious for their crazy long wait times. So, you know, if you order one of these things, don't expect to see it anytime soon. Unless you buy one used, which is what I ended up doing. This one's old. I think this one's serial number 336 or 339. And this is from the very first batch of KX2s built. All right, so this thing's ancient. So this thing is 5.8 by 5.8 by 2.8 by 1.5. It weighs 13 ounces. Power output's about exactly 10 watts. It's got a fantastic internal tuner. The only radio I think that's got probably a better tuner is the G90. The G90 will match pretty much anything. That doesn't necessarily mean it'll radiate, but it'll match pretty much anything. This radio's got an internal battery, which sort of puts it in a different league than most of the other radios we've looked at. Excellent filtering, excellent receiver. Elecraft is known for those things. It's pin diode switching, so there's no relays clicking on this guy. Full QSK. You know, if you're a CW op, you're probably familiar with how good these radios are on CW. It's 80 meters to 10 meters, and it'll do phone, it'll do CW, it'll do digital. Again, you're going to need an external device to do digital with this radio. This radio does have the Pro Audio Engineering heatsink and side rails on it. I also have the cover for it. This radio also has an extended leg on it. This is the stock foot. This one's longer. All right. So we'll take a look at the KX2 here in a minute, but let's just real quick go back over this TX500 just so that everybody remembers what this radio is like. And like I said, if you want the full in-depth review of this particular radio, watch my previous video on this radio. So let me plug it into the battery here. I was gonna hook the power supply up, but I decided I was too lazy for that. So let me get my antenna unstuck here. My coax, I mean. All right. I was stuck on the window ledge. So we'll have to turn the camera a little bit here so we can see the radio. All right. So I'm not going to transmit or anything with this. In fact, actually what I'll do is I will plug in the speaker mic just so we can hear it. We'll see if we can find any decent stations to listen to. I'm not going to screw these in. You don't need to actually screw these in. You know, they're connected without screwing those in. So fire this guy up. So again, we looked at all the different features on this last time. Let me switch. I don't know, we're on CW. Let me go down to the CW portion of the band, and we'll see if we can find any signals down here. And then, well, there's FT8. And then we'll go up and see if we can find some single sideband real quick, just to give you an audio. So let's see what we got down here. There we go. We got digital over CW right here. This is the D Expedition that's running FT8 right here, and it's obnoxious. Let's see if we can find another station. So that station's about a 5.4. Let's see. So anyway, again, just to familiarize you with everything, right? We've got a pan adapter. You can see all the different signals on the pan adapter. Right, our S meter. That's our frequency display. This radio does a really good job of filtering. The audio is very good. Let's see if I can find a little bit stronger signal than that one. That's about the same. That's a little stronger. All right, so anyway, there's CW. So let's go ahead and switch over to lower sideband. And let's jump up to the voice portion of the band and see if we can find anything. There's some stuff. There's a nice strong signal. I don't know where it went.
So we'll give it a try here. The mobile station. Do you copy November Golf 0 Zulu?
Can't hear much. I can only, there we go.
November, you're 5-9 in Minnesota, over.
So that station's about a 5.5. We got about an S3 noise floor here tonight on 40 meters.
Copy that. You faded a little bit there.
The bands haven't been amazing today.
Do you copy the Kilo Delta 8 station?
All right, so like I said, we've seen this radio before. You've seen the different features. I don't want to spend a ton of time on it, but I did just wanted to make sure that everybody was on the same page. Like I said, fantastic audio, great filtering, great receiver. I love the pan adapter. The pan adapter is nice to have in the field. It's nice when you've got a lot of signals. You know, you've got crazy band conditions and you're trying to find a clear frequency. It's much easier on this radio than it is on a radio without a pan adapter or a waterfall. But let's get this stuff out of here and let's bring over the KX2. Now, this radio shouldn't need much of an introduction. I think everybody has seen these. Pretty much every channel out there that does this kind of stuff has one of these. There's a reason everybody uses this radio, and I've talked about my gripes with this radio before. The external build quality of these things is kind of chintzy, right? The case is, it's stamped steel. It is what it is. It's nowhere near as good as the TX500. Plastic knobs that are chintzy. You know, I'm not a huge fan of that particular aspect of this radio either. However, let me go ahead and hook this radio up. Now this radio, I don't need anything else. I don't need to hook this up to a power supply. I don't need to hook it up to an external speaker. Let's go down to 40 meters. This radio is a literal shack in a box. Internal speaker, internal battery, internal mic, antenna tuner. This radio is the complete package. For the faults that it does have, it is a very, very good radio. Let me open my filter up a little bit here. Go up to 500 hertz. Let's see if we can find something. So we got two VFOs. We have a coarse VFO and our fine VFO. So we'll go up the band here. See if we can find a good strong signal here. Pretty weak. Now let's turn the preamp on here. This radio kind of needs the preamp a lot of time, even on low bands like this, to get, you'll see what I mean. If I turn that off, it can be hard to pull signals out. So the audio on this radio is good, but it's not as good as the TX500 is. So what we got here, so here's our S meter, all right, our SWR meter. This is our filter. This is our power output. Here's all our different things that are turned on. Again, that's my filter width, VFOA, VFOB. You can see the ATU is on. We're in CW mode, and we're currently transmitting on the A VFO. All right. Let's see if we can find a stronger signal than that. There we go. So we'll let you listen to that for just a second. Now watch. The other station you won't be able to hear. As per usual, that happens to me all the time. Hopefully the other station comes back. We'll give it a second. Well, maybe we lost our station. So I'm going to go ahead and hook a key up to this. There he is. So the key that I'm going to hook up to this, I've been using the CW Morse version of this throughout this video series. Today I'm using the real deal. All right. So let me go ahead and hook the key up to this radio. Now this radio, if you're going to do single sideband, there is a speaker mic. It's out in my truck. I don't have it in here. But this also has an internal microphone. So there is a little hole right here. And you push this, when you're in single sideband mode, you push that transmit button right there, and you can talk right into the radio. You don't even need the speaker mic. So, now you hear that get a little harsh and raspy. That can happen sometimes on this radio. I actually have a new speaker for this. I think this speaker's finally starting to get a little beat. You have to replace the entire back panel to replace the speaker. It's all one piece. I just haven't done it yet. It's not that hard. You just unhook the speaker connection and swap the back panel. I'm just too lazy. Let's move up a little bit. So here's what the side tone sounds like on this. Oh, I gotta hit the tuner. SWR was like 8 million to 1. 1 to 1. So you can see, this is my SWR meter, this is my power meter. I've currently got it at about 10 watts. It's actually putting out closer to 11. I turn my key speed up a little bit. I turned it down earlier. I was hunting a park and he was only set at 18 words a minute, so. So the side tone on this radio is pleasant. And if you listen, no relay clicks. All right, here's our CW decoder. If you use them, I generally don't even look at it, but it's got one and it's decent. All right, so as you can see, sending on this radio is super nice. Pin diodes, no clicks, full QSK. You can hear people sending in between your characters. It's CW on a pin diode radio like this, especially a really good one, is a pleasure to send. So let's hop up to the single sideband portion of the band and see if we can find some voice to listen to here. So one cool thing that this particular radio has, unplug the key, is it does have a direct frequency entry. Ooh, I'm on some digital there, that's obnoxious. So what I can do is I can push long press frequency right here. And we'll go 7.225. All right, and then we hit band, I think. Yep. All right, it takes us to 7.225. So you can enter. So if you look next to these, there's 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Sorry, 5's there. 6, 7, 8, 9. All right, and then where's 0? 0's right there. Okay, so you can direct frequency entry things. That's a decimal point if you want to use it. Band is enter. So let's see if we can find a halfway decent signal to listen to here. So this particular station is not super strong. Let's see if we can find anything better. Come on, don't make me go to 80 meters.
Since we get on the net, kind of like a net, with a group, and one of the fellows is out in Missouri, and he's usually playing that as well. So there you go. Okay, I'll let you go with the same as the. Thank you for the first time. Your first year is 5-7, Roger.
So that's Puerto Rico.
Roger, you're a good strong 5'9" here, a good strong 5'9". Thank you so much, Chris. Nice to meet you. 738 and Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas, 7-3. Thank you, pleasure.
All right, so let's go ahead and turn that down. That gives you an idea of what the audio sounds like on single sideband. It's a little harsh, but it's totally usable. If you hook this up to an external speaker, some of that harshness goes away. All right, so let me go ahead and go back down to the CW portion of the band and just this radio, I have a love-hate relationship with this radio. There's some things about this radio that I despise, and there's some things about this radio that I love. Like I said, I'm not a fan. I understand why they did it, but I'm not a fan of these plastic knobs. They are kind of cheap. Like I said, I'm not a big fan of the Tinker Toy kind of case this thing is in. All right, especially for what this radio costs. However, when we look at this radio as a whole, right, we've got a lot of information on a very easily readable display. This is probably the easiest to read display in sunlight of any radio that I own. You know, it's got a lot of information on here. We've got our S meter, our SWR, we've got our RF out. This is our CW tuning. So when you zero beat the CW station, it's right there in the center. It shows our filter width, all of our different options that are turned on. Right, this thing's got an internal battery, an internal antenna tuner, an internal speaker. You literally don't need anything other than you hook the antenna up and you're rolling. Like I said, if you're doing single sideband, you don't even necessarily need the speaker mic, which I'm going to be honest, the speaker mic on this thing is kind of chintzy. I'm not the only person that says that. Like I said, you can just hit the transmit button and talk into that little mic hole. It works. I've done it before. I've made contacts like that plenty of times. So, you know, you can totally do it. Now, the stock radio doesn't come with these side rails or the heat sink. That stuff's aftermarket, or the extended leg. Other than that, this radio is stock. In fact, this thing still has the original battery in it. All right, I have more than one battery for it, but the battery that's in this radio currently is the original battery from this radio. And like I said, this is from the original batch of radios that Elecraft built. So this battery is antique, and it still works no problem. In fact, I did an activation today, ran it all day. Let's see what we got for voltage. I'm still at 11.3 volts. All right, so I can do, I don't know how many activations out of this thing, quite a few. I can do multiple activations out of the little battery pack inside this battery. And you can also hook it to external power, right? So you got a 12 volt jack right there, so you can hook a battery up there. You've got your accessory and your CW key and your headphone and your mic jack on this side, and then this side is our antenna, our BNC. All right, so like I said, there are some things I don't like about this radio, but it really is kind of it isn't, when you talk about being a shack in a box, this radio is as close as you're going to get to that. If the ICOM IC705 had an internal tuner in it, that would probably be the way to go for most people. If you don't need a tuner, if you're only going to run resonant antennas, the 705 is an awesome radio. This is much smaller and much lighter. I think if you're a CW op, this is probably a better radio. Although, like Aaron Bowman, W4ARB, loves his 705. There's a bunch of guys that love their 705s. And like I said, that'll probably be the next radio I buy. But I think for what I do, I think this is probably a better radio overall. So let's kill this thing, and let's disconnect the antenna. Let's talk about these two radios. I'm going to pop this TX500 out of the 3D printed stand. So we're just looking at the radio. All right, so we've got our two radios here, and they are very different radios. And we need to kind of come up with a winner here. So I apologize for the light glare there. So let's talk pros and cons. TX500 Pro, the audio. The audio on this thing is phenomenal. It is better than this Elecraft. It just is. If you watch, Josh Nass did a live stream where he tested the receivers in these two radios head to head, and the TX500 won. Now, the Sherwood report says that the KX2 is better. My ears tell me this radio is better. When Josh tested his, now granted, his testing is nowhere near as scientific as the Sherwood report testing methods are. You know, Rob Sherwood knows what he's doing, but this radio won when Josh tested it, and my ears tell me this radio, the receiver is better too. The receiver's phenomenal, this thing. The filtering is phenomenal. The noise reduction is phenomenal. All the signal processing is phenomenal. The build quality in this radio, the build quality in this radio is so good. Unless you've held one of these, it is hard to explain how good this radio is. This radio is built so well. It is so robust. It's a solid chunk of aluminum. It really is. Now the negatives, it's expensive. It's not as expensive as the Elecraft, but it is expensive. It does not have an internal speaker, right? You either have to have the speaker mic which we looked at before, right? And if we're doing single sideband, not a big deal because you're going to need this hooked up anyway to talk, right? Because this radio does not have an internal microphone. Or you need to hook up an external speaker. Now, you can't hook up a powered external speaker to the headphone jack on this thing. It won't work. You can hook it up to the speaker mic. There's a speaker headphone port thing right there you can, but that's sort of redundant. Now, you can go into the data port and wire up a dongle for a powered speaker, but that's a lot of work to literally just plug a speaker in, when in this radio I can just plug a speaker in, right? Pop a speaker in, there we go. I can't do that on this radio, not easily anyway. Okay, so that's a downside. No internal battery. Now, they do make a battery pack that goes on this. We talked about it before, right? We've got these pogo pins. They do make a battery pack, but the battery pack doubles the size of the radio. It is obscenely expensive. So there's that. Some people will have an issue with where this radio is made. This particular one is Russian. They're made, the ones we get here in the US now are made in the UAE. But some people are going to have an issue with that as well. But I will say this radio is built better than the Elecraft is. I also really like the pan adapter, and the knobs and everything are better quality on this. These are sort of a rubberized plastic, and this is an aluminum encoder knob. Now, we'll talk about why they have plastic encoder knobs on that KX2 in a minute. Now, like I said, downsides, no internal speaker, no internal microphone, no internal battery, no antenna tuner. This radio does use those GX12 connectors, so they're not proprietary, but they're not as easy to get or source or build as some of the other connectors are. Again, they're much more weather resistant. That's why they went with them on this. But like I said, the pan adapter is phenomenal. Build quality is phenomenal. Sound quality is phenomenal. Signal processing is phenomenal. Filtering is phenomenal. But no internal battery, no internal tuner, no internal mic, no internal speaker. It's heavier. And you do have to carry all that other stuff with you, right? So let's go to the KX2. So the KX2 pros. Well, we just talked about it. It is a shack in a box. This radio has everything. It'll do CW, single sideband digital, as will the other radio. Pin diode switching, which this is a relay radio. And while the relays are not obnoxious in this radio is better. CW on this radio is better. It's got an internal battery. It's got an internal tuner. It's got an internal speaker. It's got an internal microphone. It is a literal shack in a box, right? It uses standard connections for everything. I can run it both off internal and external power. The display is crisper on this radio. Now, it doesn't have a pan adapter or a waterfall, but the display is crisper and easier to read. Now, it is lighter than the TX500, although it's not built as well. Now, downsides. Build quality. Like I said, this case is pretty cheesy. Cheesy plastic knobs, and they are cheesy. Now, they went with cheesy plastic knobs because they went with lighter encoders in this radio because they were trying to make this radio light. A KX3 has a much better encoder. Okay, this encoder is pretty cheap. In fact, that's a known failure point on these radios, is this encoder. That's why I had a nice aluminum encoder knob on my KX2, and then I took it off after hearing some people who know what they're talking about, specifically people like Thomas Witherspoon or the guy who runs Elecraft, a couple other people talk about, why you don't want to run a heavy knob on this because this encoder is not built for it. Again, no pan adapter, no waterfall. I don't think the audio is as good in this radio as it is in the other radio. However, it is easier to hook an external speaker up to this thing. Now, some of that audio is not just the speaker, though. The actual audio quality out of this radio is not as good as the other one. But again, this radio, I can throw that little AX2 whip or an AX1 whip on this thing, tune it up, and be on the air in no time flat. I can't do that with the TX500. So let's try to pick a winner here, and this is going to be tough because they're both fantastic radios. And I have to look at this from the standpoint of not just me, right? I'm not worried about necessarily, is this the best radio just for me, but for you as well, which radio is better? It's a hard question to answer, and only you're really going to be able to answer that one, but I'm going to try to do the best I can to come up with a determination. So if you operate someplace where you've got really inclement weather and you're going to be operating outside in that, this is going to be a better radio for you. You don't have to worry about this thing getting snowed on, sprinkled on, things like that. That thing, I don't want to take that anywhere near water. However, this radio is going to make you carry all the stupid accessories, right? You got to have the mic. You got to have all the different cables. You got to have a CW key adapter. I need to have an external battery, right? If I want a tuner, I need to carry an external tuner. Right? I need to carry all of that stuff extra with me. It's not in the radio. The KX2, I don't have to do that with. Right? The KX2 is you literally take this with you, and if you're a CW guy, a CW key, and your antenna, and that's it. You don't need anything else. You don't need anything else. I don't need a speaker. I don't need, an antenna tuner. I don't need a battery. I don't need any of that stuff. It's just grab this little brick and go. All right. So, like I said, if you operate in garbagey weather a lot, buy a TX500. However, I think for the vast majority of people, the KX2 is going to be a more useful radio. It's going to allow you to do more and carry less. All right. So while I love my TX500, and it might be my favorite radio that I own, if I had to only keep one, and if I had to recommend one to the vast majority of people who operate their radios, I'm going to have to go with the KX2. It's just a more complete package. There are less there are less missing features, right? I don't need to carry as much stuff. This is a shack in a box. It's, you pick this thing up and you go. Like I said, internal battery, internal tuner, internal speaker, internal mic. I don't need to carry anything else but this radio. All right. So as much as I love this TX500, and I do love this TX500, I honestly think it's a better radio. I think for most people and for most instances, the KX2 is going to hold you in better stead. It's going to be much simpler to use, although the menu structure in this thing's like absolute nightmare. People bitch about Yaesu's menus. Oh God, Elecraft, forget it. Elecraft's menu system, oh Lord, don't even get me started. It's awful. The menus in this thing are ridiculous. I showed you the manual for the KX1. The KX2 manual is a book also. It's obscene, all right? Like I said, this thing is ungodly expensive and the wait times are stupid on these things. But there really isn't anything else like this on the market. You could argue a KX3 maybe, right? Now KX3's got a better receiver, better filtering. It's got actual like crystal, like mechanical filters. It has a 2-meter module you can put into it. The KX3 is a much better radio than the KX2 is, but it's bigger. It doesn't have the internal battery that this thing does. Now you can put AA's in it, kind of like the KX1. Yeah. There are some things, there are some things about the KX3 that make it maybe not as good a field radio, but a much better radio in general. But I think for a field radio, for most people, the KX2 is probably the sweet spot. The receiver's not as good. The filtering's not as good. This thing's got cheaper encoders and those kinds of things. But I think for most people, this radio is going to be the most complete package for just about everybody. The only people that I would say probably this isn't the radio for you is if you run a ton of digital. If you run a ton of digital, buy an IC705 or a FX4CR. They're going to be better digital radios. All right. This radio will do digital. I've done it. A DigiRig, and like I said, if you're going to run digital, you're probably going to want to put the heat sinks on because this thing's going to get hot if you're running digital. But at the end of the day, if you're single sideband or CW, I think this is probably the radio for you. If you're only going to buy a single field radio to do everything, I think even with its flaws and its shortcomings, I think it's very hard to beat the KX2 just for the feature set, the fact that I don't have to carry all that extra stuff with me. And at the end of the day, I find myself reaching for this radio more than any other radio I own because it is so convenient, right? It's not as small as, say, my Mountain Toppers, right? Or my KX1. But it's just a more complete package. I don't have to mess around. Even the KX1, I still need an external battery and an external speaker. Even though this thing, even though that thing has the ability to take internal batteries, they're those AA's. And if you watch my video when I did my activation on those AA's, they only lasted like 20 minutes. Okay, this thing I can run multiple activations on that internal battery. So at the end of the day, like I said, while the TX500 is an amazing radio, and I honestly think this is a better radio, I do, from a radio standpoint. I think from a operator standpoint, for most people, this is going to be the radio you're probably going to want to buy, just because it is such a complete package. The price is eye-watering. The wait times are ridiculous. Some of the build quality things in this thing make me question Elecraft's pricing structure. I mean, I don't know if you can see that bending when I push on it, but come on, really? Cheap plastic knobs. You've heard me bitch about that stuff before, though. I can see past that, right? When I want to go out and do an activation, I just want to grab a bag and go, this is the radio that's going to be in that bag. I can run any antenna I want, resonant, non-resonant, don't care. You know, I can run the internal battery, and if that dies, I can plug an external battery in. Pin diode switching, so I don't have to listen to relays clatter. You know, if I forget my speaker mic, if I'm going to do single sideband, I don't care. I can just hit that transmit button and talk into the mic. At the end of the day, this radio, for all of its flaws, and people talk this radio up and put it on a pedestal that I don't necessarily think it belongs on. It is an amazing radio, but people make it out to be this mythical thing that it isn't. But at the end of the day, I think this really is probably the best all-around, all-in-one field radio you can buy for just about everybody. Like I said, the only people I wouldn't recommend this radio to are people that are heavy into digital, or if you're going to be working someplace, like I said, if you're going to be in the snow a lot or in the rain, this is not the radio for you. The TX500 would be a better radio. If you're digital, like I said, an IC705 would be your best bet. Probably the second best would be that FX4CR we looked at earlier in the series. But at the end of the day, I think the KX2 has to take it. So oddly enough, when I went into this, I had no idea which radios were going to win this. And both radios, the CW only radio ended up being an Elecraft, and the all mode rig ended up being an Elecraft too. It's just kind of how it worked. And I think it's because Elecraft puts so much into a package, right? There's just, this radio includes pretty much everything. Now, if you took this radio and gave it the build quality of this radio and the weather resistance of this radio and the pan adapter from this radio, if these two radios had a baby, that would be the ultimate radio. I wouldn't need another radio ever again in my life. If you just give me this build quality with a pan adapter and this weather resistance with Elecraft's everything else, dude, like that radio would dominate everyone. Even at $2,000, that would be the best radio you could buy. One more thing. Stick a Bluetooth sound card in it while you're at it, just to make everybody happy. This build quality, this weather resistance, pan adapter, these guts, Bluetooth sound card, done, right? If a radio manufacturer builds that radio, they won. That's it. Like nobody else is going to be able to compete. Like I said, even if that radio was $2,000, this thing's $1,600. Even if that radio was $2,000, I could sell both of these, buy that, and call it a day. Yasu, you listening? So anyway, folks, like I said, that kind of buttons it up for this. Now I will shoot one more video where we just kind of look at the KX1 versus the KX2, and I'm not going to compete. I'm just going to compare the two. It's not going to be a competition because these radios really aren't in competition with each other, right? If you're buying a KX1, that's a niche radio. It's out of production. It's CW only. This is a more mainstream radio, and you can buy one today. Well, you can order one today. You won't get it for 4 or 5 months, but I will do a sort of a compare and contrast and talk about why I think these are probably the two best radios out of all of these that I own. And like I said, if I get any other radios, if I get because I'm going to buy an IC705 or anything else for that matter, I will put them up against these radios and we'll see how they do head to head. But I won't do that until I've used them some. I'm not going to buy a radio and just immediately go, right? I'm going to use it for a while first, develop my opinions, and then we'll shoot a video and we'll look at how those radios compare to this. If it's not a CW only radio, I'll compare it to this. If it's a CW only radio, I will compare it to the KX1. So thank you everybody for watching. I really appreciate it. I hope you found this series informative. I hope it, if you're looking at buying one of these radios, I hope it gave you a little bit of idea as to what you're getting yourself into, some of the pros and cons. at the end of the day, there is no perfect radio, right? You're going to have to find a radio that works for you, that does the things you need it to do, and you're going to have to make compromises. Unfortunately, like I said, there isn't the one size fits all. This is the radio for everyone. If that was the case, then, you know, everybody would be using an ICOM IC7300 and call it a day kind of thing, right? But that doesn't work for everybody, right? I'm not carrying a 10-pound radio into the woods, right? It does. The CW filtering is not as good on that radio as I'd like it to be. You know, for some people, that is the be-all, end-all rig. For others, it's an entry-level rig that does everything pretty well, but, you know, like I said, I don't want to carry that thing in the woods. So, thanks everybody for watching. I really appreciate it. KX2 won. Not sure if that's a surprise or not, but it kind of surprised me because when I went into this, I didn't think this was going to be the radio I chose, yet here we are. So everybody, thank you so much for watching. I appreciate it. And until the next one, 7-3.